This is Social Leopards. I'm Bea.
And I'm Beth. A leopard is a solitary creature living in the jungle, but often not seen or noticed. Are you a solitary creature trying to navigate the social jungle?
This show explores loneliness and the many ways forward. Welcome to Social Leopards.
Welcome to Social Leopards. Today, we are talking about dealing with loneliness and social isolation when moving to another country. Our guest today is Suzanne. Hi, Suzanne.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Welcome.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I am from Minnesota originally and also Wisconsin, and I moved to Spain in 1992, and I've been living here ever since. And so initially, I've had a few moves in my lifetime growing up, and then that was a big move when I finished college. I did an internship, and then I moved to Spain, and I've been, and then there was another major move in 2013, which for me, I guess they were both equally painful / disruptive / transformative as a growth experience.
So what was the initial motivation to move abroad?
I met my husband my last year of college. He was doing a study abroad, and he is from Barcelona. So I met him in 1990, and we did the long distance thing for about a year, I think. And it was easier for me to move to Spain. He had he wasn't quite finished with college. The system in Spain is different. And I was done. I had graduated. And so I moved over in 91. We got married in 92, 93. We got married twice, actually. We got married by Justice of the Peace in Spain so I could get the paperwork done and legally work in Spain. And then we had a real wedding the year following in the States. And so that move was difficult. And my move in 2013 was difficult.
Tell me what was difficult about the first move.
The first
I know it's a long time ago, but yeah.
Yeah. Basically, I would say what both moves had in common is that you're leaving a place where you have a very strong social network. You're surrounded by people who understand you, who love you unconditionally, who get you. Especially like when I moved from the States to Spain. People who look like me. And then it's just stripped away to nothing. I didn't have any friends. The social group were his college friends. So I might have gotten along with the girlfriends at the time, later the wives, but none of them became friends of mine. I had to do that on my own to build up a social circle. And I signed up for French classes. I signed up for Catalan classes. They speak Catalan in Catalonia, where Barcelona is. So I met people that way. And then after I got the paperwork done, I started working. I could legally work, and I made friends through work. And it's a slow process to build up a social circle.
I have a question. I know it was a long time ago, and it's okay if you don't remember, but do you remember having a certain expectation of what it would be like? Was there, I think as a younger person, a younger version of you, you probably thought it was very romantic and it would be easy, right? Can you explain a little bit about how your expectations compared to the reality of moving to a new country?
Yeah, so I'm from the Midwest, Minnesota nice. People are non-confrontational, and people are generally very nice. And so my expectation was, I've been to Spain before, by the way. I did a year abroad, and so I knew the Spanish culture. They're more confrontational. They are big into complaining, but never to like the source that's going to solve their problem, but they like the cultural differences. But I expected to be like welcomed into his family. I didn't expect any attention there. That was my expectation. That was not met. I think I don't like to generalize. I think I'm almost a mother-in-law. My boys both have girlfriends. But I don't feel threatened by, there's just more love to share, bring in. Mm-hmm. My mother-in-law's generation, and maybe it's her personality, I think she always saw like the daughters-in-law kind of as, you're treading on my territory. His sister was also very not unwelcoming. And so that threw me for a loop. I'd never experienced that before. I just basically people who really didn't know me, but this like a very angry, hostile reception in some ways. And not across the board, but in certain instances, my expectation was you go in like with an open heart and you don't have your guard up, and then you have to take people as they come.
Yeah, and I can relate a little bit. My brother married, I'm Ukrainian, and my brother married what we call an American. I'm Ukrainian American, but my sister-in-law struggled with my parents in a very similar way. And I tried many times to help. Now my parents obviously are very old, it doesn't matter, but I think she did experience that because in certain cultures, I think the closer you are to the boat, that your first generation somewhere, I think you're still stuck in those cultural values of that person's got to be the same as us, and we're afraid of change. Maybe that person's not going to accept our traditions. And I think that there's some of that, but I'm sorry, and I totally can get it and feel your pain. So I'm sorry you had to go through that.
I think there's also in some cultures, and I would include the American culture, the baseline, like our way is the better way. We do it better. That's, I think, pretty universal. And yeah, I don't really know. And that was rough. So I had it, but then it took a couple of years, but to build up a social life that I did it. And I lived there. And then it was also, your social life changes throughout life because school to college, you're just surrounded by people your age. I would say also when your kids start school, that's another like wonderful place, like a fertile terrain to meet people. And so I lived there for 20 years and had built up I felt really safe and loved where I lived. Where we lived as well, like I could leave the apartment and walk anywhere. It was like a kind of a pedestrian town. And I was friends with my neighbors. I'd walk down the street. I'd always run into someone like from school or from tennis and that takes a long time to build up. And they're like slow. You build that up really slowly over time and like very maybe small interactions or big interactions, depending. And so when I moved from Barcelona to Madrid, which is about 6 hours away in 2013, and I think you need to be really, I don't think I knew, I didn't know what was coming my way. And my aunt tried to warn me because they say like this, the three most stressful situations in life: a death of a loved one, death of a relationship, divorce, and a move. But I felt so strong in the sense that, I did it. Like my identity as a social person that that's not gonna happen to me. And I was in for a big surprise.
Mm-hmm. So what did you do to reconnect with that group of people when you moved to Madrid? The same strategies, or did you have different ones?
How did it feel different?
How did it feel different? Mm-hmm. So by the time I moved, I'd been living in Spain for 20 years. The culture I've always felt really at home here. So that I didn't really have culture shock per se when I came over in 92, 91 I came over, because I'd spent a year abroad. So I already knew the culture. So I did have culture shock when I did my year abroad. Then you get used to things. And I knew the Spanish culture when I moved over in 91. I was perfectly settled in Spanish life, Spanish culture. When I moved in I think there was an identity thing as well. So I had built up a big group I had a dynamic social network in Barcelona. And I think my identity is identified as someone like a social person. I did it there and I'll do it again here. And it was very difficult because my kids were 11 and 13 when we moved. So I didn't have a lot of contact with the other moms. Like I had to drop them off at school, but I certainly wasn't walking them to their classrooms. Like when they were little, there were no play dates like when they were little, or birthday parties and that type of thing. Expectations again, like my expectation was in the same way, if someone was new to their school in Barcelona, if someone, I would reach out, we can meet for coffee, do you want to meet for a glass of wine? And I had that same expectation that at least one mom would have the flexibility, I work remotely, she'd have the flexibility to meet for coffee one morning or And I didn't make any friends through their class. Like I had like an action plan, all these different circles where I can meet people, like through the school, through the neighbors, through the rugby club, because my kids played rugby. It took a long time. And so the people that I'm friends with now are through the women in book club, and then my tennis group. And then I have other friends, but it took a long time. And so for me, I wouldn't call it was frustrating because I felt like I'm trying to do everything possible to meet people and nothing's working really. And then I remember a previous podcast that Beth shared a story, what kind of broke my heart, that I can't remember how you met this woman, but as a group that you're involved in, and you invited her to your house for coffee and said, listen, I'm really struggling and I'm having such a hard time to build a social life here. And she said, I'm far too busy. Like I need to take care of my grandkids. And I thought, you don't have an hour once a month?
That was what I was thinking. Yeah.
I think that's just such bogus. So I also had that expectation that at least someone would, knowing that we'd moved from 6 hours, different city, that didn't, So maybe my expectations maybe I didn't have the right expectations. And I think people have to know what I built in 20 years, you're not going to build that in a week in someplace new.
True. And I think you didn't have the wrong expectations. I'll tell you, my experience was I moved here 22, almost 23 years ago, and I was a single parent when I moved here, and I struggled for numerous years. Even though my daughter went to school here and everything, I happened to be, just by chance, the only single parent in her classroom for years. And I think the ladies were just like, oh my gosh, we can't relate to her because she doesn't have a couple, right? Finally, I rejoined a different tennis group, because I was always doing that, and finally met another man. And then after we became a couple, I developed these relationships. And it happened to be that these women, many of them were like me, recombined marriages and different situations. So I think it also depends on the context, like who is there at that moment, the situation changed. Like, I think it's all dynamic. I think sometimes it's not even just about expectations. It's just like right time, right place, wrong time, wrong place kind of thing. So I thought I would have been closer to some of these ladies because Ksenia had play dates. She did all kinds of things, and it didn't make a difference. They never invited me. I would have numerous parties and invite all the kids over for her birthday. It would never reciprocate. So
sad.
Yeah, but I think it's like one of those things that maybe stronger, maybe realize though that also just sometimes these situations are not conducive for everyone to make friendships.
Yep. Now that you say that, the school that they went to a big school in Barcelona, and we thought it'd be easier for them with the move to go to a much smaller school. And so these parents have been friends literally since the kids were in preschool. Mm-hmm. And even to this day, these are like groups that are just set in stone. So I know like they're not for weekends away. They have like their ski weekend or their spa weekend or whatever. And that's fine. I think it's like, I don't know, some secret society you're never going to belong to.
It's a clique. It's a huge clique.
It's a total clique. So they've known each other since, literally since the kid. My oldest is 25. And so they've known each other for 23 years, 24 years.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people in these situations that are afraid of inviting a new person in because maybe they think that person's going to steal friends and things like that. I had a friend who I'm still friends with. When I first moved here, she was my only friend, and she was so worried that I would somehow not include her if I met some of her friends, that she never introduced me to any of her friends. And I was the one that was always connecting people. And later on, I found out, and we are still friends, but I definitely think the perception of that relationship changed. And this could be one of the reasons, too. Like, these people that you met were like, oh, that person is wonderful. They're smart. They're beautiful. They're going to somehow take away these ladies. I'm not feeling secure enough in my relationship and in myself to allow this person into the group. So
it could be. It's just finding your tribe in the end. Another thing I did when I moved, you're just finding your people. And so another thing I did, which I laugh about today, I joined like this newcomers club. And because I didn't know Madrid, I'd been maybe once or twice. I hadn't been like in decades I don't know. So if you had a weekend, we just went go someplace else. Madrid's a beautiful city, but I didn't know Madrid that well. And so I thought this will give me a chance to like go every month. There'd be like a tour somewhere. But these women were all, not all, but I would say 90 to 95% were like the wives of diplomats or banking executives. And so they're just like fresh out the boat. They didn't speak Spanish. They're complaining about the schedules, I passed that. And so I said, this is not my tribe at all. And I was in it for 2 years. I remember another situation that reminded me of that as well. They did, at the end of the year, they'd have this picnic at one of the women's houses. This is like a very uber wealthy echelons that we're talking to. She had this massive house. And so every year she would let everyone, 80 people use her, they organize this picnic. And so I only knew 1 or 2 women in this group. And so one was from South Africa, and we hit it off. We got to talking at one of the outings. We both love to read. And so I said, oh, when we meet at the picnic, I'll bring you books. We were talking about different authors. And so I get there, it's just like swarming with people. I don't know, like I don't recognize anyone. It's hot as hell out. It was like springtime in Madrid. It was so hot. And so I was like, I don't know, physically uncomfortable in the sun. I'm looking for, anyway, so then I saw her and I said, oh, listen, I brought the books, blah, blah, blah. And she said, oh, thank you so much. She said, oh, it's nice talking to you. I need to get back to my friends. And then left me. And I thought, I'm like, okay, the one person I was hoping to like. And so then I ended up sitting with 2 women I didn't know that well. I'm like really pale. So I was getting sunburn as I'm like, I hightailed it out of there. And then realized this is not my tribe. And it just takes a long time. It takes a long time. I guess everybody's expectations is you think people are going to treat you the way you would treat others. And that doesn't always happen.
No, it doesn't. That's always fascinating, right? That just blows my mind. And I have to realize that everyone's different. Everyone has a different perception of what they need to be doing. And you have to live with yourself. And if you're okay being rude to someone, okay, but I'm not. So it's a different perception of what is okay. And I think that's sad that you're thinking that you can just dismiss somebody or reject someone like that. But again, I've met people like that when I first came here too, and to this area, and I started the first tennis group. There were several ladies, and they were all wives of professors, doctors, lawyers, and of course here I am by myself. And they were pretty rude. We would play tennis, and it was a very stressful couple of years. And finally, I was really relieved when several of them moved and the whole thing fell apart. And later I met a few of the ladies later, and they were always like, oh, we're so sorry how rude we were and things like that. And it was nice to finally hear, but it's like, gosh, but you were okay doing that. And they were completely unaware then. So
why were they so rude?
There was one lady, and she was like, we'll call her the kingpin of the group. And for some reason, she was the richest one, and she was the most aggressive one. And they were all somehow very excited to be friends with her because of who her husband was. And and that was like a thing. And I just had she and I would
You don't have any like social, what's the word? Like currency.
No, I didn't.
In the sense that So it was like a relationship that there was an interest behind it.
And I was the only single parent there. And also I was one of the more professional ones. Most of these ladies they never worked. They just married the guy and just had the kid. So I was in a different group, but so I think maybe they didn't know what to do with me because I was uncoupled and things like that. But it was at that point I was happy it fell apart. Now my group these days is much nicer and kinder, and I really enjoy tennis again. So yeah.
That's amazing.
So earlier you said, I know this is just a tad off topic, but I think I would like to know, and I hope some of our listeners would like to know. You said that your move was when your kids were 11 and 13, and that's a real tender age for a move as well. And I know that as somebody who moved around a lot as a child, and as I started to age, it became a little harder because they also had their social group that they were part of. Was there a sense of cultural impact on them, or were they more resilient because they were still kids and they were able to connect with their new environment when they started going to school?
That's a good question.
They took a while too. And there's between Catalonia and Madrid, I won't bore you with all the historical and political, strife between but we were called like names in school that we had never heard of, which kind of rolled off there's an independence movement in Catalonia, and my kids don't identify with it. And so it's like we didn't talk about politics, about specifically that issue at home. So they were like, okay. They took a while to get a group. And actually, that was heartbreaking too. It's like you're going through your own struggle. Every weekend, there's something going on. There's always social, going out to dinner with these people on Friday. And we have tennis with this group or paddleball. We used to play paddleball. There's always something going on. And all of a sudden you move and there's absolutely nothing. Like there's nothing on the social calendar. And that was heartbreaking too, seeing my kids home every single weekend. And so initially, like the first few weeks, they were like the novelty and they were invited, and then it just died down. When the novelty died off, there were a lot of weekends that they weren't going anywhere. We just had maybe the rugby practice or the rugby game. I would say by the springtime, then things started to pick up. And now, like Daniel, they both have good groups, nice groups of friends. And I'm friends with the parents in a lot of cases. And I think moves are hard. I would also say that a move itself is difficult because all of these like support systems, but just being like a phone call away, can you pick up my kid? Just something that simple, like I'm running late or I'm stuck in traffic and you have 5 different friends you could call. Listen, do you mind picking up my kids because I'm stuck in traffic or I have a meeting at this running late? Not having that support system, there's no one you can call. There's no one to go out with. Like I don't have a single person to call to meet for a coffee, or I don't know anybody. And then I would also say, if you have other issues, like other stuff going on in your life, that's things in life that you're not happy about, or problems or challenges, the move it's like a catalyst. It just shakes everything up. And so that happened to me too. So the move itself was difficult just because moves are difficult because of what you have to start from scratch. And it's not just the social aspect too. It's like finding a dentist, finding all the different doctors, just finding like getting the lay of the land. And I remember at the beginning, the expectation too was like, can't everybody, like the human beings were herd animals. We need connection. I felt like a turtle without a shell. And then I thought, can't people see that? I think it's like I don't know if it's a egocentric type of help me. Can't we? But there was, I don't know. It's a growth experience that way because you have to find your resources. And I think it was more difficult for me because the social group, the social network that I had before I left was like an artificial support system. And then when everything was stripped away, then you have to say like certain aspects of my life weren't working. It was easier to overlook them before is what I mean.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
The feeling or the overarching pervasiveness of the loneliness is clear as you tell your story. What's the most important thing to keep in mind when you're feeling that heaviness of what is a combination of what I would expect to be loneliness and that isolation that you're feeling?
I think the first thing is saying it's okay that I feel lonely. It's completely logical and normal that I feel lonely. I don't have my friends here. I was calling my friends a lot the first months. I would call them like daily, just saying I'm not some freak of nature for feeling this way because I lost my herd all of a sudden. And then being realistic about how long it takes to build up a support group, a friend group. There's also, this happened to me as well. It probably took me a couple of years to feel happy here. And so I remember when I would go back to Barcelona for whatever reason, I'd run into people and I'd say, gosh, I'm still struggling. It's so hard to meet people, et cetera, et cetera. It's like when somebody dies and so if someone is going through a grief process or whatever type of grief process, there's like this unwritten rule, like how long it should take you to get over it. And so I had that reaction too. But you've been living there for how long now? Like for 2 years, and you're not a Simon. So it's like this judginess. I would also say, I'm just throwing ideas out there. I think a lot of people there's a lack of connection in general. And so it was made very obvious with the pandemic how much people need to they crave connection. And which is why it was sad when you just said like people being rude. Like I can't even fathom it. Like you have an activity like in real life, which that term didn't even exist in real life. Having that opportunity to get people together in real life and then being rude or making someone feel unwelcome. Yeah. And I guess the whole experience, it makes you choose very wisely who you want to spend your time with and where you can find commonalities, common ground. And it also made me very more empathetic for people who move here. And then, so I remember where we used to live, when a new neighbor would come, and I'd give them my telephone number. And if you need anything, if you want, we can meet for coffee, blah, blah, blah. And I don't think people who've always lived in the same place, I don't think they have that perspective. Like the woman you invited over for coffee, Beth, I imagine she's never moved.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think
That's
you're
my
right.
guess.
Yeah, and that's exactly, I think that's true. I think we become more aware of that if we move. If we never move, we take it for granted that people around us might not be as comfortable, as well connected as we are, and we don't think to do that. But yes, I think you're right. You become much more aware. Thank you for being so kind to others, though. That takes a lot. It says a lot about who you are.
I just think the golden rule, and it's just it's just like what people do. People are nice to each other in general. But I do think that I guess the moves too, when you move around, you get more kind of a little more adaptable or agile. You can come in different, especially to you as well, Bea, because your parents are Ukrainian. You can swim in different ponds. And so I think, I just wish people would be a little more empathic. And so I think that that human connection goes a long way.
Yeah, and I think part of it is that people, like we said before, they get so busy that they get disconnected from that work-life balance and priorities and things that they're doing, and they forget about themselves and maybe also about others. I see that happening a lot too. And I think about, you can get so sucked into your work that you just don't leave time to even make friends and forget about the friends you have. So you're not in that space to think about, oh, this person just moved in next door. Maybe I should go over there and make them feel welcome, or things like that. So I think that's a part of it too, depending on what stage of life you're in.
That's a huge mistake, to put all your eggs in the work basket, because
I
that
agree.
Can be stripped. Yeah. That can be stripped away in a day. There's a restructuring or whatever.
Yeah.
And so then you're left with nothing.
Oh, I agree. And I think about, we could have another long discussion about this, but to make it short, my parents fall into that category where their entire life, and it was true, they were immigrants that played a role. That is all they did. And at the end, they're pretty isolated. And that's an unfortunate, that's not just them, it's their generation. A lot of people are like that. They took it for granted that you have to have friends, you have to make time for that, you have to have hobbies. And that's not how they were raised. So I think it's a new idea, I think, in our generation. But like, looking at what happened to them, I have made so many different choices because of that. So it was a cautionary tale that was very positive for me. But I think people need to realize that you're right. You cannot spend your time. Not only that, you can hear about people that spend 20, 30, 40 years working at this job, and then they retire and they die because they get so tired and so mentally, physically exhausted, and then never took that time to relax, that then they don't have anything at the end. Yeah.
But that doesn't even sound fun. Your day-to-day, that doesn't even sound like a fun existence, and not even getting to the people who don't take vacations. There was a study, that Harvard study, and it was like a longitudinal study over, 50 years. And they said they started following a group. I don't know if they were only men. I think they might have only been men, like recent college graduates from Harvard, and they followed them for 50 years. I think it's still ongoing. And after 50 years, they assessed their happiness, how happy they were. And the only thing they had in common was connections, human connections. And so it didn't matter what their profession was, there was like everything under the sun in terms of what they had gone on to do. But the one element they all had in common was human connection. It didn't matter like what they're set. Yeah.
I remember that study. Thanks for bringing that up. Yes, you're right. That was the one thing that I remember when I read it a couple of years ago. I thought, this is exactly, I'm on the right path to expand my social circle constantly and everyday focus on those connections. That's one of the things every day I think about, besides exercise, but that's I spend a lot of time on that, as you probably do, because that's what keeps you going. In the end, what is it that you have? Humanity, connecting with people. That's what life's about. That's what keeps you young. That's a social vitamin I think we need. Yeah.
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 Oh, you had a question.
I was just, as this conversation is evolving, and it keeps evolving as it goes. But I think I had this random thought at one point where I and I haven't thought about this in many years, but one of the things that attracted me to my first husband was the fact that he was grounded and that he was in a single family home that he grew up in. And I think he was born like half a mile from where he grew up. And I hadn't experienced that. And I might have been a little envious of it. And I thought that was going to give me that sense of belonging because I didn't have it. And then that prompted me to wonder, when you were growing up, you said that you had done some moving around as you were even growing up as a child, right?
Mhm.
Or were you pretty stable?
We lived in, I'm from Minnesota originally. And when I was 14, we moved from the Twin Cities to Milwaukee.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. So that's
And
another one
so-
of those tender year moments. And so you could probably relate when you moved your kids at that same age.
Yeah, it was hard. I don't remember struggling as much though with the move. I remember that first summer was probably one of the worst of my lives because we moved right after school, got out in June. And we had 3 months ahead of us, or 2.5 months, whatever it was. And we didn't know a soul. So it was just, I have 2 sisters. So it's just basically the 3 of us playing. We remember playing croquet that entire summer or watching TV, or there's really nothing to do. And then the realtor, she knew that a couple of families in the neighborhood of girls that were in my class. And so she was kind enough and she put us together. But these girls, it's like the same thing that happened with that newcomers club in Madrid. There was no we met once and we went for a walk or that was it. And then they're like, okay, my mom made me do it now. I can cross that off my list. So they didn't end up becoming friends. But then I started school in August or September. And then I was able to make friends, and I still have them till 2 of them till they're still friends.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
so I remember that move being difficult just that summer. And I know it was very difficult for my mother. And she was probably, I'm trying to think how old she was, but we were 15, 14, and 11 maybe. And so I'd have to do the math, but I think what happened to me when I moved from Barcelona to Madrid is what happened to her. And the distance it's like a 6-hour drive. It's both from like Minneapolis to Milwaukee and from Barcelona to Madrid. She had a vibrant social circle in the Twin Cities. And she had a job she loved. And so that got stripped away and she struggled.
Yeah, that is really rough. Yeah.
Beth, you moved around a lot growing up,
Oh, yeah.
you said?
Oh, yeah. My dad was a minister and he was a diplomat. And so he would go to problem churches with politics going on, and then he would fix the politics, and then we would move. And then my sad story of the day is that my birthday is in June. And so much like you, we wouldn't whenever there was a move planned, it was always at the end of the school year because, that was the least disruptive. So I would always move to a new city and then have nobody. And so I very rarely, I can't even remember a single birthday party that was beyond my mom, my dad, and my brother. I don't think I ever had.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, I mean, I'm sure I have an emotional wound in there untended somewhere, but I've moved on since.
But you're still
That's hard to be
person.
moving so often.
And you're so open to friends. You're so good that way. Despite all that, you're such a good person when it comes to being a friend. Thank you.
I think I take the things that I didn't get and I try to relive them now, through others or with others. I don't know.
Maybe you have more empathy because of all those experiences too. Like we talked about the whole empathy piece. We have to get it somewhere. And we could have a whole nother episode on my life growing up with Rudy and Ia and all the, I'm not going to use the curse words.
Yeah.
I could use so many that I had to put up with, which
I have that. I have that episode planned.
it's
Just don't know it yet.
It's going to be very triggering, and some facial expressions and words will come out. But anyway, that's for another time.
No, but I have a grief therapist that'll be along for the ride with us for that one.
Good.
We'll be okay.
Good.
But I think it's interesting that you thought that just by the mere fact of staying put in one place that you would feel a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
So you don't really build up a community if every year you're moving. It's like a military family. And
Yes, very similar.
But then the opposite can be true. Like you can live in the same town for decades and not feel a sense of belonging.
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't necessarily correlate.
It
Right.
doesn't, and it's interesting, some of these neighborhoods, that one you talked about, that realtor when you moved, that helped you
Uh-huh.
guys connect, but I think there's so many different interesting neighborhoods even in this area here, like, some of them are cohesive, people are hanging out together, and some no one even knows who lives next door, which is
Yeah.
fascinating. It's the people, it's the combination of people, so, it's all different.
So today, Suzanne, do you look back on this as just one big learning experience, or what nugget of wisdom do you take away, the biggest lesson you've learned through all of this as you talk with us today?
Everything is a learning experience. And so you have to, life gets blown up in different ways. And then you have to, I can't remember the author, but she uses the metaphor of like a glass, and it breaks into 1,000 shards. And you have to there's some that are still glittery, and leave behind what doesn't serve, and you learn along the way with what you appreciate in other people, the type of connections that you want. And I think the main thing in general in life is not to take everything as an opportunity to grow and not to become bitter. Because a lot of people I've seen moves, and I just read something the other day, it was on CNN. CNN does these articles about people who move abroad. And the article was just ridiculous about this couple who moved from Miami to the north of Spain. And my first thought was, oh, geez, you're moving from sunny Miami to the north of Spain where it rains. And so she hated the whole experience, and Spaniards are this, that, and the other. And the food is greasy, which is not. It's really good, Spanish cuisine. She had nothing good to say. And so rather than having an experience expand her horizons, it was like everything was wrong with the Spaniards. There's nothing wrong with her, her inability to adapt. And so anyway, the article was about how she moved back to Miami. Yeah, for me, it's all about learning, and then, it's a growth. The thing about growth experiences, that they're not always fun. By definition, there's pain involved, and you learn about yourself. You learn about the type of people you want to be surrounded by, and life is short. And so, time is finite. What do you want to do? Who do you want to spend it with? So for me, I can say 12 years, I'm really happy here now. I think the experience was a very good move, especially for my kids. I think their perspective is a lot wider than it would have been had we not moved, because you never get out of your comfort zone. You're never stretched, right? And they had to start over from scratch too.
Yeah.
And I think they have in the end, I think people are pretty much the same everywhere. It doesn't matter where you go. And maybe if you move around, you realize that, but I think it's made them more adaptable. And so I'm happy where I live now. It took me a couple of years, and I don't think it was all related just to the move. Like I said before, there are other things going on. It just blows everything up, basically.
Yeah.
It wasn't, I think, change is good. Change is good. It helps you grow.
And all three of us share a little bit of a similar story in that, picking yourself up and starting over again, right?
Yeah.
And I think that the overarching message that I hear and what I experienced and what you experienced is it is a long game. And if you do what the lady from Miami did, right? And you focus on the negative, you aren't going to move forward, and you aren't going to find your tribe. And you aren't going to be happy.
Right.
But if you keep trying, and then you try again, and then you try again, and you try something different, let's not try the same thing over and over again, because isn't that the definition of insanity or something?
Yes, it is.
But to expect the same outcome, right?
Yeah.
But continuing to be the best that you can be and learn
and try new things all the time.
Right. The adaptation part.
And when you turn 90, do you want to say, look at your life, and do you want to say, oh my gosh, I regret, or do you want to say, I'm so glad I tried XYZ, whatever happened, what I tried, right?
Yeah, exactly. So very inspiring words, Suzanne.
Yes.
Thank you for that.
We forgot to ask you one question.
We're still going.
Wait, just one more. Just, you had mentioned that your superpower is curiosity.
Oh, yeah.
How did that help you deal with loneliness and moving?
I think, curious for, to know people's stories, because I like connecting with people, curious about getting to know a new city. intellectual curiosity, I think, is lacking sometimes in certain people. That's another way to know if you're with your tribe. If you're the one, I don't know if you've ever been in the situation where you meet someone and you're on like question 20 and they haven't asked a single question about,
Oh, yeah.
tell me your story. And yeah, I guess curiosity keeps life interesting. And yeah, just seeing new things, getting out of your comfort zone. I think a lot of times it's hard in the sense that I'd rather just stay home. But then it's like going to the gym and you don't feel like going. Once you go, you're going to feel better.
Yeah.
And so there are things, but I love getting out of the house. I'm not someone who likes to stay home. And
Same.
yeah, so that keeps life interesting. I'd also say too, something you said before, Beth, about regrets. They say another study, it was like at the end of people's lives, their biggest regret is not something that they did, but something that they didn't do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's
And
another
so
famous one about on your deathbed, whoever said, "I wish I would have worked more
yeah,
and
my mom says
and
that all
spent
the time.
less time with my
Yeah.
family and friends."
That's why I think that we were talking about before about someone who spends their entire life working and coming home. It's just like the hamster wheel. Where come home, eat dinner, watch TV, and then start over the next day. That just doesn't sound like a happy existence at all.
Yeah.
It sounds like drudgery to me.
Yeah.
And I think our kids, they don't want that. This generation, they don't want to have anything to do with 12-hour work days or even 8-hour work days and having a sandwich at the desk. That's not appealing to most kids.
Not
And at least
anymore.
we've taught them something.
Yeah.
I
Hey,
think
have
they've
one-
seen, the model, but they don't want, kind of what you were saying about your parents. You can take the good and then what doesn't work for you, leave that behind.
I have one more question for you before we begin to wrap up. What is your favorite part about European culture that you get to enjoy that maybe Americans don't?
I would say universal health care is a great thing. No one is tied to their job because of their health care, their insurance coverage. This just the social welfare state in general. I would say people here, there's not such an over-index on work. And so people work, obviously everybody works. People don't tend to ask each other at parties, so what's your line of work? What do you do? It's not, for me, I never ask that question. I don't find it interesting. If it comes out in conversation, I'll say, I do this. I don't think that's the most interesting thing about people, what their line of work is. I would never ask it unless they mention something like.
Unless you're looking for a date. No. Just kidding.
No, I don't find it. Vacation, I think, is really important. Like, I think there's a better work-life balance. And just in the scheduling. So I've been at my sister's house during the year, and it's like really hard to have a family like when every single child has a different soccer practice schedule at all hours. Just having it, they don't tend to sit down together for family meals. It's hard to do with the scheduling. And so I think European culture, it's more conducive to that. There's a stronger family fabric here. And so I guess I would highlight those.
Yeah. I remember, where was I? Oh, we were in Aruba. One of my favorite vacations, went with a group of people, and we were in the pool at the bar, and we were talking to a couple, and I think they were from Austria, if my memory serves me correctly. I'm trying to remember, but I'm not 100% sure where they were from, but it was somewhere in Europe, and they were there for 6 weeks. And I remember how I would never be able to take 6 weeks off. And they were like, oh yeah, we go somewhere every summer. And this is where we chose this summer. And we hope to touch all continents over the next 10 years. We want to try to hit all of our bucket list places. And I thought, wow, to be able to really immerse yourself into these other cultures. And Aruba is a very Dutch culture. And they were finding it very fascinating, and they were sharing all sorts of stories with us that it was just awesome. And I was tad envious, but it is very different for sure. And
most Europeans have a month off. Yeah, they have 4 weeks off in the summer. And I know from talking with friends, at least this one, I don't know if it's common, but she said no one takes more than a week off. But I said, you can't even really disconnect after a week. And so she's never taken a 2-week vacation. And she's one of these people who rarely uses her vacation days. She would go, like, if she had a business trip, she would tack on a couple days and she'd do a long weekend. But again, I wouldn't want to, I think it's really important to take a step back. But I think that's changed in the States. I haven't lived in the States for so long. I think people take vacations now, don't they?
I guess it depends where you work. Since I was always working for the schools, I always got the summer off and I got breaks. So it was conducive to taking a lot of vacations. But I don't know. I think people that don't work in work in the private sector, I think what, maybe 1 or 2 weeks, and you're probably not taking them consecutively. You're just taking one. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I get 3 weeks.
And
Plus-
you never take more than a week at a time, though.
Yeah, I don't. I don't
Well,
think
you
I
should.
have in a long time. I took a week and 3 days once, and that felt like heaven. I was just starting to.
Wow.
Relax. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Come visit me over here.
Oh, okay. We'll.
We'll be on the next flight.
When does the next flight leave? Let me look. All right. Any last questions
I
that
think
you
we're
wish
good.
to
I
ask?
think thanks so much for sharing all that and taking the time to hang out with us. It's always nice to see you
Thank you.
anyway.
Thank you. Hope we can see each other in person soon.
Hopefully. Yeah.
All right. Thank you again for your time and the wise words and interesting stories along the way.
Yep.
We appreciate you being vulnerable enough to share your personal journey with loneliness with us today.
Thank you, guys.
Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Hey, social leopards. Don't slink back into the jungle quite yet. We have 2 important messages to share. First, remember to like this episode, drop us a comment, and if you haven't done it yet, follow this show or subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can reach us on social media. You can also email share@socialleopards.com to contact us privately. All links are in the show notes. We love and appreciate hearing from those who listen to the show.
Second, we want you to know that this show is not intended to be a replacement for professional therapy. If you are struggling or if you need to interact with another person, check out the show notes for resources. Thanks for listening.